Did you know that sometimes the most dangerous thing you can do to a powerful person is remind them that they're just human? This week starts with tariff refunds, which sounds boring enough to be federally regulated as a sleep aid, but underneath it is something much more familiar. What happens when losing a legal fight gets treated not as a normal part of government, but as humiliation? Once every court ruling becomes disrespect, every advisor becomes a mirror, and every loyalty test gets passed, powers feel less checked and more chanted. And that's where things get weird. This is Shrink the Nation. Let's go.
This is Shrink the Nation, a podcast for thoughtful, informed adults, preferably holding a drink and definitely holding a thought. The views expressed here are ours alone. They do not represent our employers, institutions, licensing boards, government agencies, bourbon distilleries, or most emphatically, our families. They've been very clear about that. This show is for education and entertainment only. Nothing you hear is medical, psychiatric, legal, or professional advice. We're clinicians, not your clinicians. If something we say stirs you up, that's not a crisis, that's a journal entry, or an email sent politely. We're here to challenge ideas, not diagnose strangers on the internet. And if you are in real distress, please reach out to a professional who can actually help you.
All right. Hey, I'm David. I am a board certified psychiatrist with over 20 years in the military. Still early in the morning, drinking coffee, but I do have this coffee cup, Rob, if you can see it, that has a passive aggressive message for you. A direct tie back to the fact that you made me wait
I did.
a half
I did.
hour here before we started this episode. So
Yeah.
nice little quiet fuck you to start my day and yours.
It's Rob. I'm starting my day with a quiet fuck you from David. So thank you for that. I got 26 years in the field of psychiatry and about 30 years in the field of the military. And David's angry with me because I kept him waiting.
So you made me wake up early.
I did.
Yeah. So I've had lots of coffee now.
I could have given you the warning last evening, probably.
Yeah, it would have been nice to have got a
Yeah.
warning prior to.
Hey, sleep in 30 more minutes. It's not my fault you're on a stupid time zone.
Probably wouldn't have, to be honest. I would have probably still woken up. My alarm didn't even go off. I just got out of bed. We'll sweep that under the rug. Take subtle digs at you for the rest of this show.
Keep being passive aggressive, David. That's cool.
I will.
I'll be completely oblivious to it. You just keep doing it, though.
To date. Okay, so there have been some news stories about tariffs for anybody who has been living with their head in the sand. There were tariffs that were initiated last year. Some of the tariffs were implemented under the IEPA, International Economic Emergency Powers Act. For anybody who wasn't aware, the Supreme Court struck those particular tariffs down. That was quite the hit at Donald Trump. But now, just recently, Customs and Border Protection has started to accept electronic refund applications for the tariffs that were paid. And now we're finding that several major companies have yet to seek out the refunds, which was asked of Donald Trump his thoughts on those while he was on, I believe, CNBC Live. And his statement was essentially that he would remember those who chose not to seek out refunds. So there we go. It's interesting for a lot of reasons.
Yeah. I think for the challenges that come with bureaucracy, one of the benefits of bureaucracy is that it depersonalizes certain things, that bureaucratic systems function as they do, not because of interpersonal relationships, but because of responsibility and rules and laws that dictate what they do. And what we're seeing here is the softening of that. We are ostensibly at least, a nation of laws. There's an ideology, there are laws that support said ideology. And this is yet another example of this sort of interpersonal, psychology driven behaviors that is not the realm in which governments or bureaucracies function best.
God, there's so many different interesting pieces of this. You have a policy that was deemed not legal by the Supreme Court. And one of the big questions I think that was posed even while they were looking at it was, well, what the hell's going to happen to all the tariffs that were already collected if this is deemed not appropriate? The answer is now you can apply for refunds. To bring you back to the day that the Supreme Court decision was announced, if we remember the response that Donald Trump had, he took it very personally. He's very upset the Supreme Court had ruled against him. This is just a remnant of this particular administration that I feel like I have to remind people of the behavior that was there because there's been so many things that have happened since then that are just beyond the norm that we're used to with this level of politics, that you got to go back and be like, oh, yeah, remember that he held this press conference where he was becoming very unhinged and he was upset. He made accusations about the Supreme Court being in the back pockets of foreign adversaries. And yeah, so that happened. He was opining throughout that entire speech that he was going to have all these other ways to implement the tariffs. So it was clearly a humiliation for him to have lost that battle, even though I think a lot of people maybe would have expected that the International Economic Emergency Powers Act wouldn't apply to tariffs, especially since Congress has the authority to implement taxes, which a tariff is tax.
Little thing that we call the Constitution. Yeah.
In all fairness, we haven't heard much from Congress lately. You kind of forget about them being a third equal branch of the government because they're not there.
Are they?
Well, they're supposed to be, right?
Well, the first, I guess, fascinating thing, this kind of ties into what we spoke about last week, which was the sort of the illusion of movement, that doing something feels like winning, feels like success. And what happened way back in the dark days of February of 2025, they came out, they announced these tariffs under really odd their justification for them had more to do with trade deficits. And any industrialized or advanced nation such as ours is going to have a trade deficit with most countries for reasons that are pretty straightforward. They don't have much money. We do. So we want stuff. So we're going to have a deficit with them because we're going to be pulling in the stuff they make, and they just don't have the finances to take on the stuff we make. At any rate, it was a big deal. It got a lot of attention, and it gave this illusion that something was happening. And so much often in politics, when you talk to people about what they hate about politics or what they hate about governance, is that this sense that nothing happens because everything happens slowly. And there's so many checks and balances, and it ends up feeling like nothing's happening. You go out west to some of the state parks, over a millennia, the wind and the dust creates these wonderful landscape features, but it doesn't happen quick. And that's kind of the nature of our government. Nothing happens fast. It goes slow, and it's supposed to go slow. It's supposed to have checks and balances. There's supposed to be debate and disagreement, and that's the structure that keeps us on the rails. This felt really fast. This was, we're doing something. Even though most economists said this is dumb, this is a tax on the American people, this is not serving a purpose beyond that. But what we got was this illusion of movement. And then what really happened is, over time, the wheels of government move slowly, the wheels of the judicial system move slowly, and it was completely invalidated. But interestingly, Trump's temper tantrum, when they got shut down, got some attention, not nearly as much as the original tariffs. And then now here we sit where these companies can apply to get money back. It's getting almost no attention. There's no public attention to this. So what stuck was the appearance of movement, even though it was utterly an illusion of success, movement, whatever. And here we are, we're kind of right back to where we began, with this big pot of money that now companies are scared to ask for.
Yeah, you made a lot of points. I mean, all of which,
Not all of them worth a damn.
you hijacked my point
Oh,
because
I'm
I was
sorry.
talking really slow. No, it's fine. No, because I think you made different points. It wasn't the point I was going to be making. I would say I agree with a lot of what you said. I mean, I think there's some nuance to some of the things that you said, which it's not a bad thing. If anybody is sitting in their car screaming like, what about X, Y, or Z? Well, I guess it wasn't really the point of everything you were talking about. Like, not all economists agree that it was a bad thing. But I mean, some economists who really liked the idea of tariffs didn't like necessarily the way that it was implemented, just kind of like a flat across. Somebody appeared to use AI to just come up with a list of what the trade deficits were based off of some, kind of probably faulty calculations to come up with the percentages. And he did back off a lot of them almost immediately once the stock market was impacted by the fact that people were kind of worried about the tariffs. But yeah, the sense of movement, and I agree with you, and I didn't really think about that perspective of the fact that the sense of movement still kind of exists as that memory in the back of your mind of like, well, this happened, something changed. The fact that it's kind of getting reversed wasn't totally glossed over, but it didn't have the same impact. And so that sense of movement still sort of exists. What's interesting at this point is that sense of humiliation, that sense of loss, still very much exists in the back of Donald Trump's mind. And so for him to publicly state that he will remember those companies who do not accept the refunds, it's a backhanded threat. It is what it feels like. These are the type of things you would expect to hear from a wise guy, right? Like, yeah, we got a long memory. But why? We know what it is. This threat, it's a humiliation for him. What drives that for him? Why is this such a damaging thing to him? Most politicians are so used to the winning and the losing just to get to that level. They lost some elections, but normally win most of them. They know that that's the game of the system, is that you're not going to win 100%. In fact, I think it was even Ronald Reagan would say, fight for everything, but we'll take 70%, because they were all about compromise. And they knew that in this grand scheme of the federal government, because there are those checks and balances and those different arms, that you're not going to win everything. To be clear to our tens of listeners, Donald Trump's tariffs didn't all get turned down. It was just the IEPA ones. So it's not that all the tariffs went away. It was just this one subsection of the tariffs. And if we're being honest, the amount of refunds is like $166 billion, dollars, which to you and me, that's a ton of money. But
I'll
to
take
our
it.
federal government, the budget of DHS is like 200 billion, right? Like the budget for the military is damn near $1 trillion. So
Mhm.
$166 billion coming in through tariffs, like that's not even a fraction, a reasonable fraction of our GDP. Why does he care that much? I mean, we could talk about why he even thinks tariffs are going to be, like, save the country from a money perspective, because they're just not. It's a tax on the people. But 166 billion, it's a rounding error at the federal level.
It is, if we want to roll back to that sort of a fascinating thing to settle in on tariffs, because it is such a minuscule, and it's a ton of money. It's a ton of money to you and me and our tens of listeners. The idea of someone handing me 100 and whatever $1 billion, oh my gosh, it's beyond my imagination what in the world I could do with that. But from a U.S. government standpoint, it's not that much, and it was never going to be, and it was always going to impact you and I, our tens of listeners, the average Joe. It was going to affect them way more than it was going to affect any of these companies. Well, no, that's not entirely true.
Small companies, large corporations, it wasn't going to matter.
Yeah.
If you're Apple and you're worth $1 trillion plus, if you're Nvidia and you're worth 3 trillion, $1 billion, $2 billion, you're like, whatever. Like
Yeah.
that, to stay in the good graces of this administration, who gives a shit? But the question is, why does it bother him that much? That's the question I think we should dig into on this show, on what we do, and we're supposed to be doing, is asking that question and hopefully answering that, so people can go, oh, so why does he care about this rounding error?
Yeah, let's dissect that a little bit. Let's talk about normal, and then we'll talk about what we saw. So, historic normal is that an administration would have vetted these ideas through their legal department. They would have gotten opinions. They would have went through the process of, this is the likely outcome in the long term. Most legal experts would have said, ultimately, this is going to play out with a Supreme Court, and they're going to deny this. So, why invest in it? Why do it? So that's normal. Normal usually involves the vetting and the sense of what the outcomes are going to be, second and third order effects, which we have killed in terms of Iran in our last several episodes. But that's not what happened here. That's the first starting point, I guess, is avoiding the normal checks and balances that normal administrations have. Help me with that one, David. Why did he just avoid normal?
See, I guess that's where my thought process, and this is, I mean, I think why having a discussion with you is so helpful. I don't see him as avoiding normal checks and balances. I see him as not feeling like they apply. And I think, to me, there's a subtle difference to that. It's not somebody who sees that checks and balances exist and says, well, if I can just skirt it, I win. Because that implies somebody views those checks and balances as valid. And I think what I'm seeing, and challenge it, please, if you need to, but what I'm seeing is somebody who's kind of buying into the unified executive theory and then some. So the unified executive theory is this idea that the Constitution gives the president this sort of ultimate power over the executive branch, and that they can use the executive branch to just sort of be their instrument to do whatever they want. But what I think we're seeing is that he's taking this to a new level where it's not that the executive branch is an equal partner within the system. It's that the executive branch is in charge of the entire federal government, and the other two branches are really there to support his decision making, not challenge it. And so I don't see him as trying to skirt the challenge of the other branches. I don't see him as trying to avoid their authority. I see him as not valuing that authority as being equal or even valid when it doesn't agree with him. Like they're not
Mhm.
doing their jobs if they question me. It's not the same. And the truth is, I think Congress has really done this, right? Congress has definitely acquiesced to his decisions. They very rarely challenge him. If put into a position to challenge him, they will typically avoid the vote. They didn't want to vote on tariffs. I'll bring people back. At the time that the tariffs were implemented, there was the ability for them to at least have to vote on whether to continue them or not, because they would have had to have challenged that vote within a certain number of business days if somebody had brought it to the floor. And what they ended up doing was turning off the clock on what days were actual business days so that they never had to bring a vote to have to show which Congress people were for or against the tariffs because they didn't want to show the world or themselves or him how they would actually vote on tariffs. So I don't know that it's just him. I think Congress is helping this. I think a lot of the Supreme Court's decisions, a lot of them do go in his favor, but they're using the shadow docket to do it, where they don't have to explain why they're ruling in that direction. They just do it. And it's interesting. I mean, it's just fascinating.
So, all right, to our tens of listeners, yet again, I'm going to tell David he made a good point. It's a rare, yeah, rare experience. Doesn't happen often. When it does, I'm always a little bit gobsmacked. Like, gosh, he's so much smarter than he looks. At any
It's like
rate,
watching a monkey type out a
an infinite number of monkeys on keyboards will eventually create art. So, at any rate, because you're right, I oversimplified it. I said they didn't think about the second and third order effects. They clearly did. You know, whether you agree with their politics, whatever, there's enough smart people there that I'm sure the second and third order effects were discussed. The potential risks were discussed.
there are economists who can make, Orrin Cass is one of them, who would make an argument, a very decent argument as to why tariffs can be beneficial to our country. Now, typically it's targeted tariffs. He will bring in the caveat that this would be the best way to do it, to target things, because the CHIPS Act, and that was bipartisan, and it was very effective and it was very helpful to our country. There is the ability for tariffs to be beneficial when used in a controlled manner. So that's the big caveat. Now, not all the arguments are sound, or they start to then caveat into, well, but it's not possible to do it exactly that way. So just throw that out there. Sorry.
No, I concur with you. And that's, I think, where we can get locked up because we can justify this.
It's like trying to untangle spaghetti at this point. There's just so
Well,
many things. Let's just say there was a good dish and move on rather than talk about each fucking strand of it.
yeah, indeed. And we can absolutely get locked up as intelligent, thoughtful individuals to justify abnormal in terms of normal. Let's think about Donald Trump as a reality TV star. That's where he found his most enduring success. And I realize he was a billionaire and whatever, but he's the P.T. Barnum of humans. His self aggrandizement has been the key to his success forever. And, he started back in the 80s doing this when he would call into gossip newspapers or gossip magazines and drop tips that he's dating beautiful women.
Anonymously dime himself out. Yeah.
Yeah. So even though the second and third order effects were probably discussed and probably discussed at length, what we see is that the first order symbolic victory means more than actual true victory.
But why? And I think that's okay. Yeah, I get that. We get that. And I mean it's clear that he wants to win. Like he doesn't like to lose.
Symbolically win.
Yeah, yes.
I'll give you
Yes.
another, real straightforward. We have already talked about this. The symbolic victory of having someone else's peace prize given to you. That's symbolic. It means nothing. It is purely symbolic. And the symbolic victory. Now, let's reel back. Let's talk about narcissism. Not making a diagnosis here, folks. I'm staying well within the bounds of the Goldwater rule. But let's say theoretically, narcissism usually involves an individual who, at their core, does not feel good, does not feel good enough at their core. And what they end up projecting to the world is their sense of perfection, their sense of what power and what success, what being, a good person looks like. To narcissist, symbology counts way more than reality because fundamentally at their core none of this is real and none of what they're showing the world is truly real. It's symbolic. All of it's symbolic. It's the look, it's the appearance. I mean, why does every woman in the Trump ecosystem end up looking the same? Because it's what he thinks looks like success or is appealing. So it's all symbology. And these victories are not real. And that's what counts more to him. And if you look at his life and his career, symbolic victories have always counted more. And it's a reason why he's had 6 bankruptcies. And yeah, he comes out the other side still the victor because, the way business works, you can go bankrupt and actually be wealthier for it.
Where I maybe disagree with you a little bit. You can't argue with what you're saying about narcissism. That's how those function. Where I want to challenge is that the symbolic victories appear to be becoming more real to this administration. And what I mean by that is I'm reminded of a quote from a movie that, man, I loved when it came out. I probably still do if I were to watch it. But there was a line in 300, if you remember that movie,
I do.
where King Leonidas
Yep.
says, before this battle is over, the world will know that even a god king can bleed. What I'm getting from these responses from him is that it's more than a humiliation. It's more than a loss. It's this temporary, in his mind, confirmation that the power that he views himself to have isn't absolute. When the Supreme Court strikes down your policy as being illegal, and then you come back and try to find a way to make that decision by the other branch moot, it appears that he wants that humiliation, that loss to be erased, whether it's through their power just not existing or not really applying because it's just, well, you can get your money back or maybe you don't.
All right. A leader in the conventional sense, so what we've come to expect of our leaders, some of them, is that they'll ask, what are the downstream effects? This administration style, it doesn't necessarily prioritize what are the downstream effects. It seems the question that's asked is, who will look weak if I do this or don't do this? A conventional leader will say, what happens if this escalates? This administration says, can escalation force others to bend to me? A conventional leader will say, what's the institutional cost? This one says, can I turn the fight itself, the fight for the fight's sake, into proof of strength? Conventional leadership would ask, what do the experts warn? This one says, are these experts trying to limit me? It's a radically different structure than what we've come to expect of conventional leadership versus this leadership. And this leadership really does end up being shows of force, shows of strength, shows of power, symbols of power are what actually drives it. It's not the actual outcomes. You and I and our tens of listeners, if we're engaged in a project and we want the end state to be whatever the goal of that project is, whereas this administration, like say they're going to cut the grass, I don't know. This administration would more prioritize being outside in a muscle shirt than the actual completion of cutting the grass. It would be the show, not the outcome.
I agree that the narcissistic tendency is there and certainly started there with the need for the symbolism of strength. What I fear I'm seeing is the evolution of that to a belief that all of that strength is real. Now, it's symbolic to you and I because we see that it's temporary, right? But for the person who is living it at the top, it's becoming more and more real. The unified executive theory, this belief that you are in charge of everything, being the leader of the country, the leader of the free world, these things are no longer symbols. It's starting to be this deeply held belief that if I say it, it will be so. And so when there is any kind of pushback to that, it's no longer, well, yeah, okay, maybe I'm not allowed to do that. No, it's not. I'm not allowed to do that. You just took a swing at God. You just took a swipe at the king. And look, your swipe maybe cut me, but it's self healed. That's what is interesting, but
Yeah.
also concerning to me is that
Oh, yeah.
it seems to be evolving. It's evolving into something more than just I'm winning through symbols. It's I'm winning because of course I'm winning. I am everything.
I mean, the unified executive approach is deeply concerning. I don't think anyone actually developed a well thought out ideology on the unified executive based on the Constitution, based on law, based on history. What they really started with was a goal to achieve certain things and whatever their ideology is. And then they built a structure around it to justify that. And then it just so happened we ended up electing a leader who fit that. Not that I mean, I don't believe for a second that Donald Trump has read deeply into the unified executive theory of government. It just so happens he lives it. It's his personality style. And here's the I guess the issue with second order effects. They require patience. They require abstraction. They require institutional imagination. They're boring as hell. They're just boring and they take time. This administration, this individual is not a patient individual. He's not going to wait for these long term outcomes that you have to look into the future, you have to wait for, you have to be patient for. It's just not going to happen. So it's cognitively real, but it's emotionally less vivid. And what he prioritizes is the emotional vividness, the emotional intensity. So it's not, what's the long-term effect? It's the immediate image that is most important to him. I hit back, I imposed tariffs, I showed strength, I made them pay. That's cosplay, no doubt. But I mean, even to this day, like the reality TV element of him, how many times have you seen him giving a press briefing where they catch him and he's like, well, you're going to have to wait and find out. You're going to have to tune in later. He's constantly doing cliffhangers. Constantly.
But he spent the last 25 years of his life living in a perceptional world where people were perceiving him to be something that he wasn't. Even with his reality show, they couldn't use his boardroom to shoot the show because it was so shitty. They had to create a set. They took him and they made him appear to be a great businessman when he had been a huge failure in every business that he had been part of. But the perception was, and on this TV show, that was a reality TV show, was that he was this great businessman. And so he was projecting out. And I think it started that way and it seemed to be that way. But what we're seeing over time is what's concerning to me is that it's like there's this video or maybe several, I don't know, but where a magician is like sitting there and most of the audience is in on this, but there's like one person they pull from the audience, randomly who is not. And the magician puts a blanket over them and then goes, okay, I'm going to make you invisible. I'm going to make you disappear. He pulls the blanket off and everyone in the audience goes, oh, he's not there. And the person is like, thinks they're invisible. And so the person is just like mystified, but they start to walk around and they're like, oh my God, nobody can see me. And they start to behave in this way. Like they'll move something and then like laugh about it because the person will be like freaking out. They'll pick up like a cup and the people in the audience are just playing along with it, but it becomes real to that person. And they start to believe in themselves. I guess that's what I'm seeing. I'm seeing this evolution of his behavior that is going from, well, everyone is telling me I have this power to, holy shit, I have it. Because everyone around him is acquiesced so much. Like he's been surrounded by sycophants. And yes, man, to the point where if he says it and they do it, and the thing starts to happen, he becomes infallible in his own mind. And so when the Supreme Court strikes down a policy that he implemented and was very confident in, and they say, well, that's not legal, then all of a sudden the reality to him is like, oh shit, maybe I'm not invisible. Maybe, crap, this audience can see me. So he has to self-correct. He has to change it to, no, wait a minute, we can fix this. And so without cognitively doing this, because I don't think he's not thinking about it this way. I think what he's saying is, I can get that power back through the actions of others.
So you're hitting at a Jungian concept. So the Jungian archetype concept, and the archetype that we're actually smacking around, one that is incredibly popular. I can't tell you how many movies or book series are based on this archetype. It's the archetype of the average individual, the weak person who has an internal ability that no one knows and that they then discover. And think of Harry Potter. So this is the Harry Potter archetype, we'll call it. This poor orphan child who's mistreated and demeaned and has no authority, no power. And the whole arc of that series is him coming to understand that he had all this power internally. Now
Holy shit!
imagine.
Spoiler alert, Robbie. Jesus.
Yeah, I know, I know. If you look at least my understanding of his life, Trump's life, not Harry Potter's life, that I think there's evidence to support a life in which I guess he had a very domineering father who had high standards. And at any rate, and then you look at all of his bankruptcies. And what happened with those bankruptcies is that the downside to the bankruptcy, he learned how to socialize that. It became everyone's problem. It became the government's problem. They bailed him out. Bankruptcy, that's the nature of bankruptcy. It was, I don't pay my workers. They underwrote the failure, but the upsize was personalized. That he learned failure could be monetized if the story was controlled. Life became about a story. That wasn't really him. So, yeah, you start to get high on your own supply at a certain point. You start to actually believe, oh my God, I have power. I have authority. I'm smart. I know things other people don't because everyone's telling you that. And any hint that you're not truly invisible has to be smoothed over quickly. There has to be a defense to that because internally, you're not invisible. You know you're not. But when you start to believe you are, and people keep telling you you are, which is a beautiful analogy, actually, when you have these hints that you're not, you smooth them over. And that's what happened with the Supreme Court. That all this power that he thought he had, that all this whatever authority that he thought he had got challenged, and he had to throw a temper tantrum to smooth that over. He had to regain the story.
What's the arc of this? You're not going to be able to predict the future any more than I could or anybody else. But what I'm getting at there is we've watched this person who's nearly 80 years old at the latter end of his life start to appear to believe. I'm not in his brain. I will caveat. I don't know what he thinks. But what we're seeing is behaviors that suggest that he is starting to get high on that supply. But because it's so big, it's so grand, they're global effects. Where is this going? Because I feel like we've seen this evolution happen before, and I will call it out. You see this in high control groups. We don't always get this kind of like inside look. Rarely will the evolution of a leader within a high control group be something that you can witness in real time unless you're part of the group. It doesn't become something that the public even cares about until late in the process when things start to become really problematic for the group.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden there's documentaries, there's books, there's exposés, all that. But we're watching this in real time, this evolution of what appears to be his own belief in himself
Right.
that failure is incomprehensible.
Well, he confuses domination with strategy. It's the short term win, it's the appearance. His incentive system rewards drama over competence. And those kind of are the baselines here that we're dealing with is that it's drama, the drama over the ultimate competence and dominance over a long term strategy. The issue is certainly he's driven to be on the stage in the front of the class. The problem is that when you get in that position, it's so much harder to continue to pretend to be something that you're not. And time always plays out that if you're confusing domination for strategic outcomes or you're prioritizing drama, that drama is going to win for a little bit. Ultimately, the lack of a strategy starts to stack up. And we're seeing it now. We're seeing the incompetence. We're seeing this exhaustion with the drama. When they first came into the administration, took over, that drama felt good to a lot of Americans because it was the illusion of success through movement. It was just lots of shit happening. But at a certain point, people just get tired of drama. You miss Joe, not because you necessarily felt like maybe you didn't think you did a great job. It doesn't matter. What you did feel is I don't have to check the news every morning to make sure the goddamn world's still turning. Every morning at 5:30 when I turn on the news, I'm thinking, what crazy shit happened since I went to sleep? That drama gets exhausting and we're all going to get exhausted. And then the incompetence, the fact that domination is really the key rather than a long-term strategic outcome, the incompetence starts to stack up. And here's the scary thing. I mean, really in the short term, in the next year, 2 years until we're done here, the incompetence will stack up. It's always going to be someone else's fault. So the cabinet's going to have incredible turnover, just like in the first administration. Someone has to be to blame because this incompetent decision after incompetent decision has to have some drama associated with it to justify it, some dominance associated with it, so that I'm still winning, I'm still a winner. People are going to get tired of it. The election cycle coming up, we're probably going to see some massive overturns. It's not necessarily because people are now all of a sudden more Democrat versus Republican. It's just they want something different. So different is the Democratic side. Next election, it's probably also going to shift because people are just going to be so exhausted with this. Where I am perpetually anxious about, though, is that incompetence, that lack of strategy has downstream consequences. Insulting our allies, threatening to take Greenland, doing the kinds of craziness that is happening, which is a show of dominance, does have a long tail. And that tail, we're going to be paying for years and years and years, recapturing the trust of the world. Right now, we're the crazy big buff guy at the bar who might punch anyone at any time, convincing the world again we're a trustworthy partner. We're stable. Our word matters, not just now, long term. And we've always done that. I'm not even making the argument we've always made great decisions, that we've always done the right things, but we have deprioritized drama. We have been stable. Each administration along the way has stuck largely in a worldview with prior precedents. We've been consistent. And now all of a sudden we have shown the world it's not exactly how it works. You can get one inconsistent person in and it can really mess things up. We're going to pay for this for decades. And internally, there's a book called, I think it's called The Fifth Estate or something along those lines, but it talks about like the bureaucratic day-to-day jobs that the major governmental agencies do, like the Department of Energy and its control of like nuclear material. The critical importance that competence, just competently doing the damn job, plays in the function of our day-to-day life. So much so that we don't even know. We don't even think about it. You go to your tap, you turn on the water, you're pretty convinced you can drink it. We don't have to think it through. You don't have to ponder it. We just do it. We go to a restaurant and we eat the food, confident we're probably not going to get diarrhea later.
Obviously, you're not eating at Taco Bell, yeah.
Other than Taco Bell, but then you expect it if you eat at Taco Bell. That's your fault. That's on you.
I mean,
But
it's the reward. Clean out.
the clean out. Yeah. But we are so confident because the underlying mechanisms are there that we don't even have to think it through. There are so many things that happen in this government that we just take for granted. We don't even know that they're happening, have been so good at it. And because of the incompetence, the lack of prioritizing competent individuals in these roles, we'll pay for that too. I mean, the downstream consequences of this administration are difficult to even fathom. It's breaking shit that has never been broken. So we're going to have to actually spend a decade just figuring out what's broken before we can fix it.
Yes, I agree. I'll make an argument that that is a feature, not a bug of this administration. I mean, that was the purpose of Doge, was to break a whole bunch of shit. Did it save money? No, it cost the government billions of dollars to do what Doge did. Now, it was under the guise of making things more efficient, making things cheaper, but the way that they went about it was very expensive. But what they accomplished and what the original goal was to break enough that it had to be rebuilt at some point with the hope that it would be rebuilt in a very specific way. That was the purpose of Project 2025. Incapacitate the federal government so that it could be rebuilt into a specific image. And I agree with what you're saying, that it's going to have to rebuild. But I think that was a big part of the purpose. The thing that concerns me in the moment, the man is nearly 80 years old. He is not going to live forever. But as he goes further and further down this path of behaviors that appear to be belief that his power is greater and greater and inalienable, we've seen the escalation of that. It's implementing tariffs across the board when they're struck down, needing to rebound from that by saying, I didn't get cut. Look, I'm not cut. I'm not bleeding. Actually, it's fine. It's not real. They said it's not legal, but as long as
people don't ask for the money back, then my tariffs still stood and I'll put in new ones. But then it was, I have prevented 8 wars to now he's attacked, what, 7 countries or something?
Not making a case for the Peace Prize, is he?
Well, I mean, yeah, there's the board of peace that you sit on while you're simultaneously escalating and whatever. But what I'm seeing is this escalation. So go to Venezuela. What happened was we cut off the head of the serpent by going in and swiftly taking Maduro out, right? And what happened there was we're going to take Maduro out, which he did, and it was easy, right? It was easy in his mind. And we talked about this before. What was he going to do? Was he going to leave the administrate? Like, was the goal really regime change, as he said, or was it, I just want to show that I've done something? And what they do? They basically said to the person who was left, do what I say and you're good. Just be friendly to us and you're fine. He didn't put a new person in. And so then he saw, well, I can do this in Iran as well. But Iranians, they're just not the kind of people who are going to just switch because you said so. I think the hope was that the people were going to rise up and take over. And that didn't happen. But the escalation of it was so much more. So that's what I'm worried about, Rod. That's what I'm concerned about. That's what I'm seeing is this escalation of this belief that whatever he does is infallible and then just fix the back end when the God King bleeds a little bit. You didn't see that. It wasn't blood.
He's living rent free in my noggin. And it's actually pissing me off a little bit because I spend way too much time trying to just make sense of this and piece it all together. But what I've come to is that he has catastrophe trained grandiosity.
Way to bring the terminology down, Robbie. Thanks for
Yeah.
that. Yeah.
Well, we want to keep it at a fifth grade reading level. It's not grandiosity despite failure, it's grandiosity metabolized through failure. So when you look at his life arc, there's lots and lots and lots of failure after failure after failure, largely because of what we just talked about, which he prioritizes drama over consequence. And that's what happens. But he comes out the winner each and every time. And you had mentioned this, I think last time, that he ends up coming out the winner. So he has trained himself. And I don't even know if he's thinking this through. I think it's more a feeling. He's like feeling his way. That failure actually ends up making him more grandiose. The problem is like if you're running a casino and it fails and you come out the other side, $100 million richer because you basically didn't pay anyone and you stole the money and you're like bankrupt, debt free, that's one thing. But for a country, for us, for the United States, the arc here is failure. And then coming out the other side somehow with a story that he's still grandiose and it wasn't his failure. It's socialized failure. The failure gets socialized. We're all absorbing this. We're absorbing the gas prices. We're absorbing the cost of tariffs. We're absorbing the cost of this war. We're absorbing these things totally socialized. It's not falling back on him. It's his decisions, but it's not impacting him.
So, where I see a difference in what you're saying, the only thing I would disagree with, or I would say look at through a different lens, because I think, yes, through most of his life, it was him boosting up himself, not necessarily purposely, but just through every failure was escalating for him because he came out clean on the other side. What the difference is now is that it's not him elevating himself now. And this is where I see the similarities to a high control group, because it's not that the leader elevates themselves. It's that the leader has followers who elevate the leader with each loyalty test, which is really what we're seeing with the tariffs thing. With each loyalty test that people go along with, that the followers say, okay, the leader is asking me to not talk to my family anymore, so I won't. That strengthens the leader, right? That builds up the leader. And so what we're seeing is, and we've seen this for over a year, that there's these loyalty tests. And with each success in the loyalty test, because you don't need all the followers to follow, you just need some. But every time something outlandish or a violation of morals or ethics or just norms occurs and the leader survives in that leadership role, it just strengthens the leader more. And it isn't necessarily the leader who is strengthening themselves, it's the activity of the follower. Now, the leader starts to believe it. And that's where you'll see that arc over time, where the leader goes from having some followers who believe the vision, who believe the story, because the followers want
the easy answer. The simple answer can be helpful. It's the easy answer, the tough questions. The followers want that. And as the leader guides them down the path of this is the easy answer, believe this, follow this structure. As the followers go along with it and they get deeper and deeper into that vision, the leader gains strength. But then at some point, there's a switch in the leader where the leader goes from knowing that they're selling bullshit, that they are just offering up an easy solution to a complex problem and it probably won't work, to where as their followers follow along with them, they flip. They start to believe it themselves
Yeah.
and it becomes a reality for them. And that's what I think we're seeing. That's the why at this point, is that I think what we're starting to see, it's not him desiring more power. It's him having been experiencing more power. Congress has not done anything. The people around him are telling him, this is great. Keep doing this, to the point that it starts to become his reality. It's no longer, ooh, I think I might be invisible. It's holy shit, I'm actually invisible and nobody can see me. And if somebody kind of looks at me and I see that, that wasn't real because I am really invisible. And then it starts to transition into, well, why am I visible? Why am I so special and nobody else is? And it's because a higher power has gifted that to me. And then
Mm.
eventually it becomes because I am the higher power. That's what I'm worried about, is that it's going in that direction.
Me too. And I concur with you. Gaining power is a second order effect. It's a downstream effect that requires some strategy and some planning. It's real tempting. It's real tempting. And I see this all the time on news pundits, etc., who want to pretend that Trump is stupid. And he's not. He's not stupid. He doesn't ignore second order effects because he's stupid. That's too simplistic. He ignores them because his psychology is built around first order domination. Life has taught him second order consequences are paid by somebody else. So the priority is that first order domination, looking powerful, making people bend, embarrassing others, getting them to pay homage and give him fealty and sit around in a cabinet meeting where every one of the secretaries has to open up with a tribute to the great leader, embarrassing themselves. I mean, it might have,
What fucking reality are we in right now, Robbie?
it could be like North Korea.
You're right, because I think in North Korea, he's, the supreme leader and he's appointed by a guy. Yeah, so you're right. Yeah, but that's where it's going.
What it really reminds me of, there's a great video of Saddam Hussein when he took power in Iraq, and he's in the parliament, and these guys all of a sudden realize, oh shit, he is now in control, and he could kill any of us. And they each stand up and like pledge their loyalty to him, and he's standing there with his arms crossed, just watching. Every time I watch news footage of a cabinet meeting, when you have to start off by basically telling the leader that they have the biggest penis in the room, and it smells of lavender and cedar and all that.
Sandalwood.
It is stunning, but as you just said, I don't think power for power's sake, because that takes strategy. That's a second order effect, is consolidating power. It is the dominance up front. And when he sits in those cabinet meetings, it's the dominance that he exerts over all of his secretaries when they pay fealty to him. And that's the first order effect. And that's the most important.
The thing I want to highlight is that it begins with control. It begins with dominance. And then, if left unchecked, because I think one of the most important things to a leader in a high control group is the inner circle that helps to continue elevating them and kind of handles the stuff around them that might challenge their role as being the supreme leader. That inner circle is really important. But as that control and dominance starts to evolve or de evolve, I suppose, into this belief system that everything that has been said about this person being divinely put there, it starts to become reality in their mind. It becomes their truth. The takeaway point here is, why does it get to that point? And the simplest possible explanation I have is because the person who is going through that is human, which, by the way, is probably the worst thing for the leader to acknowledge and accept, is that because they're human. If you or I were put into that position where all of our whims, our desires, anything that we say is affirmed, appreciated, loved, people are just telling you, wow, you're so great. You're so smart. Everything that you do is right. You will start to believe it yourself. You will eventually become that in your own mind as well. If you were surrounded all day, Robbie, by people who told you that you were the second coming of Christ. And you were like, okay, well, if I'm Christ, go get me a Pepsi. And they brought you a
Diet Coke.
Pepsi. Well, yeah, I'm being nice, but okay, go get me a Diet Coke. And that person brought you Diet Coke. And then you're like, okay, well, go invade Iran. And they're like, yes, eventually you would start to believe it too. Probably the worst thing to tell Donald Trump would be, you're just a guy, right? You're just an 80-year-old man. You are not fit. You are not svelte. He's one of the tallest presidents. Yes, you are a very tall man.
Good for him.
Your skin is not tan. You are balding. Like your hair is ridiculous. It's been ridiculous your entire life. People make fun of that a lot, but it doesn't matter. You are just a human man. You're damn near 80 years old, and you go on these massive tirades that people completely check out for. In fact, probably one of your greatest assets is that people tend to not listen to you. You're just a human man. That would be terrifying to him, I think, to have that conversation. You're just a guy.
He has those moments, though. Everyone has those 3 a.m. moments.
Yeah. We do see this Truth Social post, right? He goes on these tirades for hours and hours. I think he's having that transition of the belief because in the daytime, it's all better again.
Mm-hmm.
And honestly, I wish people would stop trying to kill him. He's got to be the most assassinated, attempted president, at least. I mean, people got to stop trying to shoot this guy.
I concur.
But stop. Stop it, people. Stop trying to assassinate him. Just stop it.
There's no place for violence in a democracy. There's no role for it.
No, it's ridiculous. Like all of it. Like nothing about American politics is worth murdering anybody for, to be honest. Like we talk
Agreed.
about this shit, but like, come on. It's ridiculous. All of that. But
I concur.
let's end there. Let's stop at assassination attempts. Let's move to a prescription.
Amazingly enough, my prescription is actually directed to our great leader. He's got to stop treating the federal government like a leveraged casino with a nuclear service room. He can't keep walking up to the blackjack table, betting the mortgage, betting the supply chain, betting the Strait of Hormuz, and then declaring himself a genius because the rest of us got stuck with the tab.
No, you're not wrong. I wish you would have said craps table because that's a roll of the dice. My prescription is to his cabinet, which is you got to stop dragging the fake invisible guy down the path of him believing that he's invisible. And it might benefit you being in the inner circle, but gosh, it hurts everyone else. We need a president who understands that he's fallible. And a big part of that is just people telling him that he's not wrong. Any good leader knows that they need somebody in the room or somebody's in the room to challenge their ideas. You can't formulate a full perspective, good plan if you don't know the counter arguments. And that's kind of where we're going. Stop viewing this human being as anything but, because that's what he is. And maybe that's going to be my mantra from now on is Donald Trump is just another guy.
Just a dude.
I wouldn't say dude. He's an old man. He's just an old man.
As my kids would say, bruh. He's just a bro.
I mean, they'd say boomer. They'd be like, he's just some boomer.
That's true. That's absolutely.
He's just some boomer. It's gross. Anyway,
He does love the 80s. He loves the 80s. He talks about them all the time.
I'm surprised he doesn't want to bring back soda shops. We got to bring back the soda shops.
Right.
Back
That's
in
how we
my day.
Make America great again.
That's right. I think we've talked this to death.
Oh, we have.
Although I'm sure there'll be more of it in the future because I don't think this regular old man is going to go anywhere for a while. But hey, thanks for sticking around. Appreciate any likes, subscribes, shares. I think we're going to update the website here shortly at some point. Just make it a little bit, I don't know, up to date, new, fun. So check that out at some point. That's about it. Anything else, Robbie?
Nope. I think we killed it.
Yeah, we did. All right. Well, let's cue up that music and we are out.